Welcome to the X Factor. I'm your host, Charles Epstein. Joining me straight out of Tokyo is one of my rotating co-hosts, Mr. International Citizen of the World, a man of multiple parts and languages, Mr. Michael Piker. Michael, hello.
Great to be here.
Michael is VP Global Total Rewards for Shiseido. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Shiseido.
Shiseido. Okay. I'll get it right the second time.
No
The
problem.
global beauty giant. It's been a couple of months since we spoke. You were on to talk about cultural agility with two of the principals from Next Expat. At the time, you were still settling into your new digs and place of work. This is what, your second or third tour there
Actually,
in Tokyo?
fourth.
Fourth.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I'm assuming you're fully settled.
Yeah, I am. And my husband, I guess the story was most people know I'm gay. So Japan doesn't recognize LGBTQ, but they made an exception. My husband's now legally a resident. So that was a pretty big deal.
Wow. I think you had mentioned that in a conversation we
Yeah.
had. That's amazing. How long of a process was that?
That took 7 months, but you just got to be tenacious and it worked out.
Wow, that's amazing. Today we have a special guest, Michael. I'll let you do the honors.
Yeah, so I've been very, very fortunate to know Dr. Anna Tavis, who's the Department Chair of Human Capital Management at NYU, which is a fantastic uni in my hometown of New York. So, Anna, perhaps you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Yes, I've been at NYU now for about 9 years, built out the department, and I'm just trying to keep up with the changes in technology in the business so that our students, who are mostly exclusively graduate students, master's degrees, are well prepared for the workplace of the future.
Great. Well, really do appreciate you joining us today, taking the time to speak with us about AI and all the things we're going to be talking about, AI and HR. Michael, I believe you have been an adjunct there for about 4 years, teaching courses on global mobility
Yeah,
and
I've
total
been,
rewards.
I do at Erasmus University, NYU, and a slew of other places. It's a topic that's so passionate, and Anna is extremely famous in this space.
I always bring Michael in, trying to reconcile the time zones, to talk to the students about usually global compensation, global HR. But as we start with his personal story, it's very powerful for the students to learn how they can actually craft their international careers.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent. Anna, in your career, you've held leadership roles at major global companies and now in academia. Was it difficult making the shift from the private sector to academia?
In fact, it was difficult to make my very first shift from academia to private sector. Because I started out I got my PhD from Princeton University and pretty, academic research, et cetera. And I started teaching at a university. But then I realized, having gotten tenure, that how much it was disconnected, really. The research I was doing, always backward looking, always looking at what people have already done. And so I started consulting to companies and gradually make a transition. And that was a much more of a challenging transfer. I spent 15 years globally in Europe. I worked for Motorola in London, for Nokia in Helsinki, and did a short stint with Novartis in Basel. And then I came back to the US, joined AIG on Wall Street in 2006. It was a great, powerful, top insurance company on top of the world, very global. That was attractive to me. And little did I know that track, my transition to the Wall Street was about to become historic in about 18 months after I became the head of global talent for AIG. the financial crisis occurred, and the company basically had to be sold out, different parts, including the office building where I was. So that was the first major shock that I've experienced in the business. I learned a lot of lessons. And in terms of transitioning back to academia, I think for all, and I think Michael is doing it successfully, my recommendation for people in the business is always to stay connected to the educational institutions, come back, give a guest lecture, mentor students, think about potential internships that you can provide. And so keeping that connection to the actual workplace and the actual classroom is really, really important. And when at some point, Michael, if you decide to jump, you already have a good track record teaching. That is a very valuable skill set.
Yeah, exactly, which I enjoy immensely, like yourself. Building on your great track record, obviously you've been in public, private sector, academic institutions, pandemic, post 2008, you just alluded to, which was really tectonic shift. What have you personally observed in terms of what we might call indispensable, charismatic or characteristic leaders across these different sectors that need to effectively lead their organizations through periods of great change? What are those nuggets of leadership attributes that really do that adroitly?
I think number one is, leaders who, sustain their, vision, their, respect, always get respect from the people who follow. We know that leaders are really about fellowship. Do people follow these individuals? Are very grounded, I would say, centered around who they are and what they want for themselves and for their organizations. And they can communicate. And it's not about PR. It's not just about messaging. It's really acting out who you are out of that center. And I think people have, in organizations, always look for that level of authenticity in a leader. With all of social media around us and branding and PR again and advertisement, people have developed a pretty good discernment of who really means it. And that comes across very, very clearly. And when hard times come, I think it's those leaders who maintain their strong positions in their companies, as opposed to those who start flip-flopping and changing their values and losing track of who they actually are. That's where the organization starts falling apart.
I mean, building on those themes, Anna, and you're very much in the domain of human capital management. How have you kind of seen the evolvement of HCM over the years? How is that actually playing itself out?
It's really it's an interesting question. I was reflecting on that. I think we started out in a good place with like Peter Drucker, right? If you think about the fundamentals of what we do in human capital and HR, even going to the times of personnel, in the 50s of the last century. But Peter Drucker was the first who really prioritized this kind of human-centered workplace. He talked about culture, the importance of having a vision, building teams, all of those foundations. And I also want to just do a plug that Peter Drucker first started teaching at NYU when he was in New York. Yeah, he was a management professor. And so we're very proud of that. And so that was Drucker. And then with Milton Friedman, neoliberalism, etc., that's kind of the economic view of who the humans are and what organizations are. We kind of became that Six Sigma kind of transactional, outcome-oriented organizations. And the entire and McKinsey had a lot to do with it. If you remember the war for talent, it's only the
Hmm.
top performers who are worth investing in. And you,
Yeah.
Michael, were on the reward side of it. Let's do. I remember when I was at Motorola, we collaborated with McKinsey on their study of the war for talent. And it was about, the term was top grading. Let's find all of those unique high potentials. The entire HR was rotating around that high potential and everybody else. And
Yes,
Jack
exactly.
Welch,
The bifurcation.
yeah, and then Jack Welch came in, and this the lowest, looking for the guilty HR. Let's find those 10% and
Exactly.
cut them out, etc. And now we got with the software coming in the early stages of internet, agile brought teams back in. We kind of went away from waterfall project management to agile project management. We
Yes.
started looking at more kind of team-based approaches, collaboration, the classic Google study that came out, Project Oxygen, and Project Aristotle, where the New York Times wrote about it. It kind of became the mainstream
Yeah.
ideology around what organizations are all about. And what I'm seeing happening now, without naming, specific people, is actually a regression back to that top, only a few hardcore
Yeah.
individuals who are worth keeping, the rest of you are worthless, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a little bit of a concern. I do not think, honestly, I think the majority of the organizations are not going to go there.
Mm.
Going to keep that more human-centered approach, how it's going to be. So HR is at a transition point where we see
Hmm.
kind of a spectrum of companies where there will be some that will continue, and there's a whole vocabulary emerging around that, the founder mode, again, with this kind of unitary executive setting the rules and everyone follows. But there are just as many organizations that support the collaborative, network-based organizations, somewhat decentralized, with a lot of participation and engagement from the employees. And I think it's an important juncture because what I advise my students is to be very careful around what kind of culture they want to work for.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. By the way, Anna,
Exactly.
we do want to get into the challenge of maintaining that human focus in the age of AI in a moment. But I want to ask you, your latest book, The Digital Coaching
Mm.
Revolution, explores AI-driven coaching. How do
Yeah.
you see AI transforming leadership and driving employee development?
Yeah, I think, my whole thesis, and I run a conference at NYU now in my fourth year of that conference, Coaching and Technology Summit. And we started with, the very early stages of digitization of personalized training, development, et cetera, which I see is delivered through coaching and
Mm.
coaching methodology. But I see with the proliferation of those tools, where they started as a platform, basically through Zoom, connecting a coach and a human coach and a client,
Mm.
evolving into exclusively AI driven coaching solutions that become democratized across the organization. So if coaching in a traditional sense was available to executives primarily because of the costs involved, et cetera.
Mm.
Now, through AI tools, it's scalable across the entire organization. And that's where I see learning development of employees is going to be heading toward a personalized coaching solutions developed, delivered at the time of need, built
Yeah.
to the workflows in your organization. And I give you an example really quickly, because I've done a lot of research, as Michael knows, in the evolution of performance management. And so one of the challenges of the traditional performance management was that the manager never had the time for feedback. The manager could, especially with larger groups, yes, teams, the manager would meet with, traditionally once a year for the performance evaluation and maybe for goal setting. But with these AI coaches built into the workflow, employees can get, at least at the level of their goal completion, et cetera, get feedback as needed every day. And several companies are leading in that space. For example, Atlassian and even Microsoft have already created tools that are providing these AI-driven coaching. And it's not just giving you the data, but also the recommendations around what you should do or what your options are to keep up with your goal, your goals and meet your expectations. And based on this kind of continuous feedback loop that in input, we could see a significant rise in productivity and effectiveness of individual employees. So that's where I see kind of learning getting out of its silo in a more kind of broadly democratic sense of how do we have everyone in organizations learn, and then embedded into the workflows, and people are able to make adjustments and getting in just in time feedback, and therefore becoming a lot more productive and better performers than they used to be if they were waiting for feedback for a whole year.
Exactly. Always on. Exactly. Really zealotly focused, curatorial LMS solutions, always on bots. Absolutely. And it's you sort of build on that wonderful theme. How do you perhaps see how AI and HR and coaching, do you think it's going to depersonalize the employee experience? Will it amplify the employee experience? How do you see itself playing out in this rather tricky area right now?
Yeah, I am on the kind of the optimistic side of AI because again, I think that as we were discussing the stages of evolution of HR,
Right.
I talked about the kind of the Peter Drucker phase, and then this whole kind of humans as machines and only the top people matter. I think AI is a very different kind of technology. I do not feel that it is a machine-like technology, and I've done quite a bit of research on what is called emotion AI or effective AI that is much more tuned up to the emotional side and even developing EQ type of relationship with the employees. So in the absence of human empathy, for example, and there are some really compelling studies around it. And I'm working with a few of these AI coaching companies to study the impact of these emotional AI coaches and even, assistants and companions. And they're, I think, filling in the gap where the organizations were not able to provide human interaction, same as feedback. In the situation where there's a lack of that from humans, AI is a really, really powerful substitute. And the humans respond very positively. There should be a level of caution. And there I see mostly, with the rise of less of coaches, but more companions, these companion websites where, people create their own, emotional companions and all sorts of partners, etc. So I think that should be age gated. And there should be some, constraints because people do get very involved with emotionally enabled tools. And I call them tools, but they're technologies, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity if we're careful in setting some guardrails around how this could be used. But at the same time, I think humans who lost their ability to be empathetic, and there are some psychological studies done. I already am familiar with some of the research that's going on psychological types of AI, just like we talk about our own psychological type. I'm an extrovert, introvert, etc., and all the different facets of human personality. We're seeing that the same type of nuance is becoming available on the AI side.
You talk about using tools that are more emotionally attuned, if you will. And we touched on the challenges of making organizations or ensuring that organizations maintain their so-called human centricity with the emergence of AI. But what else could HR leaders do to maintain this focus or balance?
Yeah, I think the responsibility of HR going forward is going to be more and more to be kind of to fine tune this relationship of humans and technology. I do not think that HR now is thinking about it that way. I think that thinking about productivity, efficiency, transactions, how we bring agents in and kind of replace the transactional side of work with these technologies, and humans then can continue to be more human. But I think where we do not know yet, and not enough research is done, and I'm working on it myself, is we do not fully understand the relationship between humans and AI. What is the psychological impact that these types of very kind of high EQ technologies are going to have on mammals like ourselves, the evolutionary humans, right? What is that? There needs to be a much better understanding on potential impact. And to give you an example, we're just beginning to understand and get control over social media. We 10 years plus down the road from where we started and what we think it was going to be, we're seeing the side effects of social media, right? And social media and people like yourself, and you mentioned that, Charles, that you were already self-regulating around how a particular social media site, you can already differentiate between good and evil. But it took a while to get there, right? So I think with AI, we need to be knowing that history. We need to be very careful about where it's going. And I think people who are heading HR, as much as they're looking at making productivity their goal, putting these agents in place, et cetera, they need to be very mindful around the impact on the culture. I think interesting point of research could be hybrid teams where, a robot, and there will be more and more embodied robots, are members of the teams. How are we treating those members of the teams if, the three of us on the podcast and there's an AI next to
Exactly.
that can also generate questions, et cetera, et cetera. There's a relationship there we're building. I think that these are the areas that HR needs to understand better. How are we going to build hybrid teams? What is the, healthy ratio of having, technology and humans on the team? What will be the, even from the rewards perspective, Michael, something that I know you and I are going to be working on. How do we evaluate human productivity Before, as I mentioned, we were looking at high potentials. These are
Mm.
people, they went to certain schools, they learned certain skills, they got certain certifications and experiences, and those were proxies for how well they can perform and fit in with a team. Then you bring somebody in who is much better than that particular experienced, well-educated individual at using AI. And they're able to harness a whole team of robots to help them get, to the level of performance that this individual who spent 25 years honing in on a particular skill. How are we going to assess that if the output will be the same? These two people are going to produce the same product or the same output. What is the reward that is going to be fair?
Right.
There's going to be a huge conversation around fairness in those types of conversations.
Right.
Those types of situations.
Yeah.
I
And
saw, I'm sorry, Michael. I just want to make
go ahead.
a quick point. Just this morning, I saw, I don't know who did the study, but the results indicated that, yeah, there is an acknowledgement that AI is improving productivity, but at the cost of employee satisfaction. So I think one of the big challenges is how do you make work fulfilling in the age of AI?
Yeah, because the whole idea of work is evolving too. And my favorite quote is from the director of the London School of Economics, who said that work was about the muscle, then it became about the brain, and in the future, it is about the heart. And I think the work and satisfaction is going to come from, a different level of engagement. And this is where we kind of started tiptoeing with the software becoming the driving technology of organizations before, and now it's going to be AI. That it's about engagement, it's about commitment, it's about vision, it's about leadership. All of those things are going to become even more important, not less important, in the organizations of the future, as those organizations are going to become much more hybrid in terms of humans collaborating with machines.
Building on those really cool themes that you've mentioned. So as AI devolves into the workplace, and specifically into HR, how do you see the skill and capability of an HR professional? How is that going to shift in the next 5 to 10 years? How are we going to have to, I talk about this, I should say every day, about re-equipping your toolkit every 10 minutes. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah. If I could just do go on a parallel track of sharing with you how I think about it as a HR educator, right? Because here I am, head in the department, human capital management at the university. This was kind of the traditional track. People start their careers, they come to the university, they learn certain skills. Who is teaching them? People teach them who have had 20 years of experience in XYZ company, preferably a big company, etc. And I now have done almost like a 180 pivot from what I taught. I no longer teach Harvard business cases, pretty much very rarely. And I lean into more product design, technology design, even for HR. I have all of my HR people learn to code, and not because they are going to be expected to code, but because they need to understand what the machines are doing for them. And the classes that, if you look at my curriculum, the curriculum we're teaching in HR classes are around algorithmic responsibility, for example, one of the courses where we're talking about the ethics of technology and applications of technology, storytelling with data. Yes, you're going to get data, but how, and it's less about data mining. It's less about, let's teach them to be, data scientists. I think the data scientist side of it is actually going to be outsourced. It's already taken care of, including coding. But what do you see in the data from based on your experience, on your intuition, on your connections with people? What are you hearing, et cetera, et cetera? So you can, we often elevated the data to the point of data knows better. And it's not, as you know, it's data is showing us something. You still need to read it and you need to apply it. So HR coming, elevating HR from the trenches of compliance, just basic data collection and organization, reports, to interpretation, context. That's where the higher level, the Q, collaboration. And so the courses we teach are consulting skills, coaching skills, because these HR people will have to receive a report, make sense of it, see how it applies to their organization, problem solve, go to their senior leadership and consult them on what the potential solutions could be, show them, several kind of change management scenarios that will need to happen, et cetera, et cetera. So working what I call at the top of your license, where before that type of work was only available to the most senior people in HR. And the rest of HR folks were kind of worker bees, right?
Yeah.
Scheduling, reporting, data collection, chasing people down for compliance purposes, all of that. We can put agents to do the nudging for, for what needs to be done. But I think that kind of consulting, interpretative level of work is where I spend a lot of time with my students.
Yeah. And I absolutely 100% agree. Storytelling, the ability and the muscle intellectually to elevate up is transformational. And I sort of demand that in the teams I lead. And that, exactly like you said, is where HR is going. On a periphery note, I'm just curious, a little bit off piece, but you've got this encroachment of AI coming. You have all these new amazing students at NYU. Do you ever get worried as a professor of the department that they're going to use these tools to do their homework and actually cheat on a test, or you really get worried about that?
Michael, I require it. I require them to work with AI. Yeah. I mean, look, if I were an English composition teacher, I would probably take a different track. But preparing my students to be HR leaders, and I have some incredible graduates who are literally leading major organizations in HR roles. I want them to be ahead of the curve. I require AI, and I actually spend time with them looking at the final product. They have to submit the kind of first draft of what they got from AI, and then their editing work on the report. And I have them contrast and compare. In fact, in my class I just taught in January, I picked out the best, and I spend the time analyzing of how the progression happened from the AI-generated report to a really personalized in your own, how you find your own voice, how you edit, how you present, all of that. And I think that the students find it very helpful going forward.
Interesting.
Do you find that relying on AI, as your students are, as you're encouraging them to do you feel that it risks degrading their critical thinking skills? They're entrusting too much of that to AI?
No, I don't think so. Again, this is where I'm teaching them to use the same approach with AI and as a coach, right? Because you could go back and say, okay, you generated this. What is the potential pushback that I can get from this report? What are the, and I have an extroverted, founder mode leader to whom I need to report to deliver this report. How should I prepare my presentation, my story, right, based on this report? And then you can role play. I have technology that is recording. We train coaches on that technology. Provides feedback of how much time you spend doing like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that you can get so much training. And what I expect from my students is to show up prepared, because they had all the tools before they would need me. They would make an appointment, office hours, and I would spend hours, and it's my time, it's their time. No, you come to me prepared, and I will do the fine tuning of where you are when you already scenario played several options of how your report could be prepared. And it's all done on your schedule, on your time. And there's nothing better than, getting that off my plate when I can focus on the final product.
By the way, I do want to, before I forget, want to applaud you for making HR people, your students, code. And it's very much aligned with what we're doing in AIX, because as we know, HR people, with all due respect, have historically, traditionally not been quick or ready to adopt, incorporate technology. But this is different. It's important. It's critical that they do. And so we don't want to pander. We're bringing people on, and if the conversation is at a certain level, and the conversations can get kind of abstruse when you're talking with people who get really into the weeds on AI, I don't want to dumb this down. As an HR person, you need to raise your game, which I think is very much what you're doing.
Totally. And it actually, they themselves are grateful and surprised, because they come in with so much inhibition. And when they actually do it, especially now with these tools, it's so much easier. That it's very liberating and empowering to a lot of HR people.
Yeah.
And
By the way,
these are my students, at least my students. I don't know that, because they're still sitting in organizations that require a little bit more, coaching.
So, obviously obsession with OpenAI, Sam Altman, all that.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks ago comes along this scrappy upstart called DeepSeek from China. I lived in China, and NVIDIA stock, tumbled in one day. Everybody did. What do you see them as, sort of a dystopic interlocutor that's going to shift the Valley obsession to maybe another part of the world and drive AI technology supremacy?
Oh, I think it's just a validation that open source is where it needs to be. Because a lot of what they've learned, I'm sure some of those engineers, and Chinese engineers, learned from the US. So I don't think the bottom line, it's not nuclear technology, and the genie is out of the bottle. You are not going to be able to, just contain it. And in many ways, I was very, very happy for that development, especially in the context of our previous discussion. I do not think that this is going to be, a monopoly for much too long, just like the internet as well. So I'm very excited about that.
Anna, thanks so much for spending the time with us. It was a fascinating conversation. Really do
Thank you,
appreciate
Charles.
it.
Nice meeting you.
You too.
I'll
Thank
hope
you.
to see you in Tokyo.
See you in a couple months.
Today, we were joined by Dr. Anna Tavis, clinical professor and chair of the Human Capital Management Department at the NYU School of Professional Studies, where she leads MS degree and certificate programs in human capital management. On behalf of Michael Piker, this is Charles Epstein for the X Factor podcast. Thanks for listening.